explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more compiled by David Chance. Revised 2023. 2, 10, 18, 9/11 terrorist attacks. September 11 attacks.
Contact Report 206.
Much guilt will be awarded for an event that will occur on the 11th of September, 2001 in America, when fundamentalist, radical extremists who hate Americans will murder thousands of humans in an act of terrorism, about which I may not mention the closer details officially, but rather only tell you confidentially.
Contact Report 212.
The Earth humans will still cry out in the coming years when the 2B note, Bush, as father and son, take over the presidency in America, as I have told you. Both of them will be inhuman warmongers and will cause contempt for human life and evil acts of war to be spread into the wide world. In their self-glorification and vindictiveness, and in their lust for power, thereby stirring up terrorism throughout the world, but they will also exert themselves under the guise of peacemaking. In truth, they will indulge themselves in a form of terrorism, like earthly humanity has never seen or experienced before. Their terrorism will encounter foreign countries in a warlike manner and will demand many thousands of human lives. But revenge for this will not be missing, for in evil acts of terrorism, they will be encountered by foreign extremist powers in their own country, whereby also thousands will lose their lives, particularly through an act of evil when the Americans, in their great pride, are encountered by aircraft that are reutilized as destructive and thousand-fold deadly weapons.
You mean, what will happen with respect to the WTC as you told me in confidence? An event that will arrive in about 15 years. Do you mean that?
That is of correctness.
Contact Report 215.
Thus I will offer Enoch's prophecies in an understandable form. Far in the West, it will be different. The United States of America will be a country of total destruction. The cause for this will be manifold. With her global conflicts, which are continuously instigated by her and which will continue far into the future, America is creating enormous hatred against her, worldwide, in many countries. As a result, America will experience enormous catastrophes which will reach proportions barely imaginable to the human beings of the earth. The destruction of the WTC, that is to say, the World Trade Center, by terrorists will only be the beginning. Yet all the apocalyptic events will not only be brought about due to the use of unbelievably deadly and destructive weapons, such as chemical, laser, and others, and by cloned murder machines. But in addition to this, the earth and nature, maltreated to the deepest depths by the irresponsible human beings of Earth, will rise up and cause destruction and bring death onto the earth. Enormous firestorms and gigantic hurricanes will sweep over the USA, bringing devastation, destruction, and annihilation, as will never have happened before in living memory. Not only will America, but also all other Western industrial countries, which still live at the beginning of the new millennium in the delusion that they could dominate and rule over underdeveloped nations. That is to say, third world countries, not only soon lose influence over these, but must defend themselves against them. According to the prophecies of Enoch, the truth about industrialized countries is that they only seem to appear to be true civilizations. But in fact, they are not, because more and more, at the end of the 20th century and at the beginning of the third millennium, they will disregard all true love, true freedom, and true wisdom, as well as true peace, along with all values of humanness and of being true humans. But not even all the terrible happenings will hinder the USA in continuing to proceed with its actions against all countries. Even when the North American continent will be stricken by the most terrible catastrophe which has ever been recorded, evil military powers will wreak havoc with computerized and nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, whereby it will also happen that computerized weapons become independent and cannot be controlled any longer by human beings. Overall, this is the most important part of Enoch's prophecies.
Contact Report 230.
When the WTC will be destroyed by terrorists with hijacked commercial airplanes, whereby thousands of human beings will die, that Bush Jr. and several of his criminal confidants will then know this but do nothing about it. A criminal act so that Bush gains the upper hand and can move against Islam, of course always under the guise of wanting to free the USA and the world from terrorism.
Contact Report 313.
The Americans have for decades, apart from the Indian massacres, slavery, and various other atrocious things of the last centuries, committed acts of violence all over the world, including in Vietnam and in Islamic states, etc., for which they had to expect that one day they would be presented with the bill for it, which unfortunately happened in a very terrible way on September 11th, 2001 with the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and the fortunately failed assassination attempt on Camp David. Of course, there is no justification whatsoever for what happened, quite the contrary. And it is extremely terrible that many innocent people lost their lives in the process.
Contact Report 328.
But now another question concerning the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York on 11th September 2001. The speech is about the fact that the American government, and especially President Bush, had been warned about this event, but that he had consciously and radically put a stop to everything in order to be able to realize his plans for world domination, his greed for the acquisition of resources and land, and the American position as world police, etc., in the form of the War on Terror in a worldwide form. And when you consider what he has already done in Afghanistan, like his father, who was not a bit better, you can imagine that the rumor is true.
In this respect, I am not allowed to give an open answer, since you are writing down the reports of the conversations when you later retrieve them from our recording devices.
Aha, this answer also says a lot.
Contact Report 435.
The so-called SOG Team Special Operations Group of the CIA Central Intelligence Agency actually exists, and this is a damned unpleasant fact because both the SOG team and the CIA do not shy away from any murder. The CIA is the real secret U.S. world government, whose headquarters are located in Langley, Virginia. The main task of this secret organization, which functions as an intelligence agency and is a superpower in the superstate, is espionage, for which the U.S. government pumps billions of U.S. dollars into it. It can be said with a clear conscience that the CIA has practically unlimited power and is not afraid of any crime or inhumanity. On the 11th of September 2001, the World Trade Center was attacked, and only 6 days later, on the 17th of September, the monstrous thing happened that is unique in all democratic states in our world, and therefore has never happened before. The completely irresponsible, sectarian, and self-important U.S. President George W., with his signature, Bush issued a carte blanche for the CIA, authorizing it to imprison or abduct people even on the vaguest suspicion, and to use interrogation methods that are beyond all human rights, human dignity, and humanity. This applies both to al-Qaeda fighters and to people who are simply suspected of terrorism or of endangering the state, etc., which therefore applies both to clear and suspected persons who are involved in terrorism or who are simply suspected of being terrorists and enemies of the state through denunciation or espionage. And the CIA does not have to justify itself to the President of the United States, the Senate, or the public about these activities. because the CIA is so powerful that it is completely above the government and even controls it. And consider that the CIA is only one of 15 U.S. secret services, but the most powerful one, which, even through the other secret services and through the FBI and the police in general, lays out its networks and has them under control. So the CIA is not only the secret service that governs and controls the USA, but the whole world. And anyone who does not follow its rules is, in a nutshell, killed hard and fast. The most radical weapon is the SOG team, that is to say, the SOG Army, which is unique in the history of all secret services of the world, and whose elite soldiers are merciless killer robots, who kill out of lust for killing, do not care about law and order, but only kill blindly, if they can only follow their orders. If the USA is the largest terrorist state on Earth, which acts globally and wants to bring all earthly resources and countries under its thumb, for which every dirty means is just good enough, then the CIA is the largest and state-sanctioned or legalized crime organization that has ever existed on our globe and has no equal. And when, on the 11th of September 2001, the Al-Qaeda terrorists struck New York, crashing into the two towers of the World Trade Center with two hijacked passenger planes and triggering an inferno, another plane was piloted into the Pentagon and a fourth one crashed in the state of Pennsylvania. The power of the CIA grew immeasurably. New anti-terrorist laws were created, which practically wrote carte blanche for the search for terrorists. The press was muzzled and the CIA was given freedoms so incredible that a normal citizen could not even imagine them. However, this could only have happened as a result of the Al-Qaeda Terrorist Act, which indicates that it was deliberately allowed to happen. The fact is that the CIA, through its spies and informers, was just as fully informed as the irresponsible U.S. President George W. Bush about the terrorist plot being devised by Osama bin Laden, but neither he, the CIA, nor any of the secret services did anything to prevent the disaster. There were several reasons for this. Because, on the one hand, the terrorist attack had to serve to give the CIA even more unlimited power, and, on the other hand, by carrying out this attack with bland and dirty lies, it was possible to dupe the American people and launch the war in Iraq. Furthermore, the expected terrorist attack also guaranteed that the CIA and the other secret services and the U.S. government would not only have to gain more power, but also a larger sum of money, which actually happened when the terrorist act was carried out and claimed more than 3,000 human lives, which both the CIA and U.S. President Bush had to accept with cold calculation. There was no reaction on the part of the Secret Service and Bush or CIA head George Tenet, even when, on the 30th or 31st of August 2001, the FBI and the CIA arrested a suspect in Minneapolis by the FBI, and the CIA named Zacarias Moussaoui, who, as it turned out, was a replacement assassin in connection with a plane hijacking. CIA Chief Tenet did not respond to warnings that terrorist attacks were to be carried out using hijacked passenger planes, while also concealing important information from the FBI that would have allowed the arrest of all those terrorists involved in the terrorist disaster. But anything is possible for money and power in the USA, both for the U.S. President and his vassals who are in bondage to him, and for the criminal secret service, the CIA, and all other secret services.
Contact Report 544.
In recent weeks, I have been asked again and again about the events of September 11, 2001 in New York because of the terrorist attack. But there are also broadcasts on television about conspiracy theories concerning the events of September 11, 2001. In this connection, for example, the predominant conspiracy theory is that the U.S. government itself instigated this catastrophe and had the CIA, etc., pack the two towers full of explosives and then have them blown up, which is why they collapsed.
In relation to the conspiracy theory, which is widespread in relation to 11 September 2001, and not only in the United States, it must be said that this is, in fact, corresponds to a nonsense. Truthfully, everything arose the way the investigations by specialists and the secret services have resulted. Nevertheless, however, There were certain weak intelligence findings in relation to this al-Qaeda crime, which were also brought to the attention of U.S. President George W. Bush, but which he completely ignored, just as they were not taken seriously to the extent that they should have been by the few people who were responsible for it at the CIA, namely only 3 persons who vaguely knew about the findings. The ignorance on the part of Bush himself was based on sheer foolishness, on the one hand, and on the other, on the deeply rooted and only halfway conscious of confused thoughts of having a means of countering the ever-present threat of terror on a global scale should a terrorist catastrophe occur. As we were able to clarify, the vague cognitions of the 3 CIA people, 2 agents and a supervisor, were directed towards the likely possibility of a terrorist attack on the USA, whereby, however, not a single assumption referred to the 2 towers of the WTC. The assumption was simply of a general nature. In his confused foolishness, the U.S. President G.W. Bush was unable to calculate the real danger in advance to such an extent that he would have ordered measures that take hold and also mobilized the CIA on a large scale for the purpose of making accurate investigations and taking precautionary nationwide protection measures. And such protection measures would in fact have been possible, as our probability calculations have shown, but as a result of the failure of the U.S. President and the 3 CIA people, everything turned out differently. However, this was already noticeable in 1976 like that, when my daughter Simya Se made the respective predictions for you, and you were obliged to silence. Then Quetzal made the same predictions for you again in 1986.
Contact Report 626.
Then I want to ask you again about 9/11 because a conspiracy theorist, a certain David Ray Griffin, who apparently belongs to a so-called truth movement, claims that the hijackings and the destruction of the towers were faked by the U.S. government and U.S. Secret Services.
And with regard to Griffin's absurd claims, it is to be said that the whole thing is absolute nonsense and based on deliberately fabricated false evidence, whereby Griffin, in his conspiracy delusion, created lines of evidence that have no truth whatsoever. The truth is that everything happened by bin Laden or al-Qaeda terrorists, as it was made known to the world public and as it also corresponds to what you copied from Wikipedia on the Internet.
Contact Report 672 21st Century 9/11 Conspiracy Theories. The terrorist attacks on the 11th of September, 2001 are alleged to have been either knowingly authorized or carried out by U.S. Secret Services themselves. False. The U.S. President and U.S. intelligence services had only suspicions and vague indications of impending attacks in the U.S. by U.S. hostile Islamist terrorists, but no knowledge of how, when and where they would take place. Contact Report 688.
Good. Then now a question, because I am asked again and again from all over the world in relation to the events of 2001, when the double attack on the World Trade Center in New York took place on 11/9, 2001, and the crazy conspiracy theory arose from this, that the U.S. government and the CIA themselves had planned and carried out this catastrophe. At the time, however, you expressly stated that this was absolute nonsense, because the conspiracy theory had come about and been circulated particularly because many people had heard several explosions that had allegedly been caused by explosives and for which the blame was conspiratorially placed on the U.S. government and the CIA. But you have explained that these explosions did take place, not because of explosives, but because the many tons of aluminum from the destroyed aircraft melted as thinly as water and developed tremendous heat and exploded when they came into contact with the water from the sprinkler systems, because such thinly liquid aluminum is highly explosive when it comes into contact with water, as you have explained. And the immense heat of the aluminum, which is as thin as water, also melted the steel girders, whose protective concrete shells were torn open by the impact of the planes and exposed the steel, which could not withstand the great heat. According to your explanation, this made it possible for the steel girders to melt and for them to collapse and also for the towers to collapse. But you said, I do not know why, because I never ask for such explanations, that I should keep silent for at least 15 years and not say anything, just as I should not write anything down about it. But now this time is over, and moreover, I am asked again and again why the World Trade Center event is supposed to be a conspiracy theory. Hence the question whether I am now allowed to speak openly about it, and give a correct answer to the questioners?
Today there is nothing to prevent you from answering questions. But the reason why I had to impose silence on you is based on our directives, which did not allow us to reveal facts that first have to be investigated.
You mean in terms of scientific investigations that need to be conducted by Earthlings?
Exactly. And such investigations have been going on for some time in the correct manner. Consequently, the experts are on their way to the correct findings.
Interesting, though. What took them more than 15 years? But that is understandable, because the cogs of science to their findings and progress turn slowly on Earth.
That will change in the more distant future.
Contact Report 717.
1947. However, also the USA itself will not be spared by this emerging terrorism, especially when at the beginning of the new millennium, New York will be hit by much suffering and destruction, and terror will claim thousands of human lives. Note, Billy, World Trade Center terrorist attacks on 11th of September 2001, where at the same time 4 coordinated aeroplane hijackings took place, and these aeroplanes were steered by Al-Qaeda terrorists into the World Trade Center, into the Pentagon, and into a field near Shanksville, about 100 kilometers east of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, resulting in the total death of thousands of human beings. It is all caused by the world domination greed of the USA itself, which will stupidly and thoughtlessly train hostile and devious revolutionaries of various countries of South America, etc., as well as Arab religious fanatics, etc., in a military guerrilla way, who will be organized in the background in a terrorist way, and will later attack the hated hegemonic United States of America and bring thousands of deaths and destruction to their country.